As a kid, I became very familiar. Let's put it this way. I got a reputation for, I knew I was the type of child who wouldn't tell somebody I disrespected them when they came at me with decidedly the overbearing intention to batter me senseless if I stood up for what I believed about them. So, to say the least, I'm familiar with Seattle's approach. Um, and I was called two-faced for talking about them behind their back as a child. I've not. Listen, Seattle was offered the drop on Wattenmaker, who took me to the Blind Dead where there was a vomit bag. They had the drop on. They decided to cooperate with an Attica State Prison psychiatrist who had implanted a nerve agent in a 9-year-old deaf kid. If that is on your list of admirable species, by all means, embrace the Stranger newspaper and Dan Savage and all of them. People probably wonder how I get myself into this stuff. It's true that my sincerity about a band that is understandably considered morbid by some people. I don't like how they turned out, but my sincerity was something of a gold standard for me. I mean, I didn't follow Foreigner. I mean, I knew about Bad Company, some of the spin-off stuff. I didn't particularly care for what Ballou was doing with them. And I gave him that postcard because I had to make a ruling. You know, Bowie once said, hang on to nothing so it don't let you down. You know, I had to make a ruling, which is the copy. And the idea drives wild the postal union's anarchistic Ayn Randism about spiritual property, man. That after all, defending the sea and the Star of David is a slave trade for genocide. And the dialectic between which is the true imprint, my sincerity and Robert Fripp's sincerity, or this postcard. And when you're being robbed and hustled and not allowed on property, you know, the Zeos throw rocks at the Palestinians' house in the West Bank, say, I'm going to come and get that one way or another. They had me in seizures. How Ballou auction, we don't know really what happened with that. Nicety from the Night Watch people. Maybe Getty was involved. The shop administration, when they had me before I was attacked, before Michael Reagan's favorite scene somewhere, or around the time of Michael Reagan's favorite scene, mentioned Getty. He was a vindictive man, and there are similarities to what happened to his child. The kidnapping, the ear being cut off, and so on. So Getty might have had something to do with all this. But the Swami Nostra side is like a theory of Sufi non-covetousness. They went Ripper Hatter with craziness, just tearing the carpets with their jaws. Because one thing I believe is that in real life, if you're fair to people, like there was a bookstore called the Magus in University District here in Seattle area. It was fair to me. It was the first time anybody had ever been fair to me about books I sold them. And I had no experience with that in Pittsburgh, where books were always ripped off. No matter how valuable they were, no matter how precious you are, you just get ripped off. You just get burned. And it's easy to see why somebody who could create those kinds of conditions and maneuver them, like Peter Sinfield. Somebody should teach Toon the pronunciation of "They're coming to take me away" backwards so he can get it straight. I don't know if there's anything to this stuff. I don't really like the lyrics of those bands, most of them. I don't really care for them. I don't care for many of the King Crimson lyrics anymore either. I don't pay any attention to Peter Gabriel anymore. There were some lyrics that they played that were, like if you look at the company that Gabriel kept in Genesis, Steve Hackett, Fripp was obnoxious to him. He was a sensitive man. Tony Banks was like a key influence over my second favorite instrument over the sax that I played. Key influence. He never seemed to be bothered by anything. He was good for a while. And recognition from the classic people is all, that gives me the willies. That makes my hair stand on end. I can tell when people are being sincere and insincere sometimes. Sometimes I can't. Some people are better than others at that. And it was like, these kids rescued me, and I mentioned that they were black. It was like I was subverting the dominant paradigm. Oh, giving the postcard was the ultimate trickery. And it's not a valuable society that would go about that. And I wonder what's really going on back east and in Seattle that this could happen. I don't pretend I understand it. When I actually did some research, my impression was the closest I got to an understanding was that the situation was a retrofit. Like Greta said today, the European Union are looking at what America is doing with the IC and taking notes for an international deportation movement. My work in the IC is that the FEMA was retrofit to them by the IDF. It was not what it was intended to do. It was intended to rescue children, not treat them as disasters, to rehabilitate them from disasters. Now, old money is certainly a factor in Pennsylvania. The families who have the money, Getty, as I say, was mentioned by Shah. Old money is certainly an aristocracy, and some of the most precious property in Highland Park now is owned by whoop-de-doo black folks. The Kamala Harris and lethality sect, and Oprah Winfrey and them. Obama's get ahead people. But even so, that doesn't explain what they stood for. It doesn't explain what happened in Gaza. Let me tell you why I don't think it explains it. Okay, see if this makes sense. Pennsylvanians, not just Pittsburghers. Pittsburghers are a misfit bunch of people. But Pennsylvanians pride themselves on being dirty fighters. I find it difficult to believe that people like that, people who pride themselves on being dirty fighters, would suddenly become absolutely appalling chickens over a moral issue. Just, woo! That gives me the willies. That's too weird. That they would become cowards over a moral issue. I find that difficult to believe. So it has to be, if that's not what happened, if seeing the Israelis autograph bunker buster bombs that they dropped on tents, signed Jimmy Crary by Josh Shapiro, forged our names on these bombs, right? They said, oh my, don't tell anybody, don't say anything, don't you dare. They became absolutely shriveled with pusillanimity, which means cowardliness, chickenliness. Unless that's what really happened, I don't understand what happened, because I don't believe that that could be possible. To repeat my point, people who pride themselves on being dirty fighters, we're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Pirates, the Phillies, for heaven's sakes, don't just roll over and kick up their feet over a moral issue that's too scary and serious for them. It has to be something else. I don't really understand it. The closest I got is that they don't know what they're doing. They've been misled by a retrofit.